Welcome to yet another edition of TV Africa News. This is Africa Today. My name is Najima Lima, but first at headlines. Kampala has the most number of tarmac roads but has the poorest people, says Museveni. Tanzania bans children's books on sex education for violating cultural norm. Chikankane not shaken by Yassini's Ford threat. Welcome once again. Now the news in detail. President Museveni has rallied Ugandans to embrace and support government efforts of wealth creation and economic transformation, noting that having good infrastructure doesn't automatically mean wealth for households. We have more. Speaking at celebrations to mark the Jananbumu Day in Chitugum, northern Uganda on Thursday, President Museveni said, whereas the country has realized tremendous economic growth, many households are still poor. Museveni said that the tarmac road are there, but if people don't use it to look for wealth, poverty will stay. He added that hospitals, schools and good roads will be there, but in their homes, they will still have poverty. He gave an example of Kampala, where are many tarmac roads, but most of the poor people are in the city center. The president asked the elites to preach the gospel of the NRM that emphasizes wealth creation as a way of not only alleviating poverty, but also create jobs. Museveni emphasized that the elites need to spread the message of the people working, but with calculation. Government has in the past 36 years also introduced a number of poverty alleviation programs, including NADS and Operation Wealth Creation, but all have either struggled or failed to reach their intended goals. This state of affairs has prompted government to introduce new programs, including Emyoga and lately the parish development model, in a bid to alleviate poverty. The Tanzanian government has banned from schools several children's books on sex education, accused of contravening culture and moral standards in this East African country where homosexuality is criminalized. We have more with Ahomoza.
While speaking to reporters on Monday from capital Dodoma, the Education Minister Adolf Mukenda said that they are banning those books from schools and other education structures because they are contrary to cultural and moral standards. Among the books banned is Diary of a Wimp, Greg Heffley's Logbook, a series of American graphic novels that have sold millions of copies worldwide. The government did not specify why it was targeting this diary featuring a teenager, but it assured that the inspections were being conducted in public and private school libraries to ensure that it had been removed. The minister also included in this first list of unacceptable books a textbook on sex education and books mentioning LGBTQIA groups. Last week, the head of state Samia Suluhu Hassan called on student leaders to be wary of imported cultures from abroad and asked Tanzanians to live according to their culture. In Tanzania, homosexuality is punishable by a minimum sentence of 30 years to life imprisonment.
As Somalia continues to experience a historic drought, pushing millions of Somalians into acute food insecurity, the International Fund for Agricultural Development announced that it will substantially strengthen its support to Somalia and resume its direct investments after loan areas resulted in a 3-decade-long suspension. Speaking during IFAD's 46th session of the Governing Council, President Alvaro Lario said that this came at a critical time when Somalia is facing critical challenges to its food security. The President of Somalia, Hassan Sheikh Mohamud, welcomed the re-engagement, but he also called on governments not just to invest in immediate aid for countries like Somalia. According to the Integrated phase classification, 5.6 million Somalians are currently experiencing high levels of acute food insecurity, including 214,000 people considered in a catastrophe situation due to an unprecedented drought not seen in decades. Projections show that as many as 8.3 people from Somalia could face high levels of acute food insecurity between April and June 2023. This includes preventing the loss of life of approximately 6.7 million of the most vulnerable people. Moving on, a Russian military frigate docked in Cape Town Harbour on Monday ahead of controversial military drills with South Africa and China, coming as Moscow is about to mark 1 year since its ongoing invasion of Ukraine.
The Russian consulate in the Cape Town tweeted a photo of the ship, the Admiral Gorshkov, in the harbour, saying it was on its way to Durban, where it will take part in joint drills. The exercise is dubbed Mosi, which means smoke in the local Swana language, are scheduled for February 17th to 27th of the port cities of Durban and Richards Bay. They all coincide with the first anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine on 24th February. More than 350 South African armed forces will take part in the exercises with an aim of sharing operational skills and knowledge with Russia and China, the South African military said last month, the second such exercises between three naval forces. South Africa has refused to condemn the invasion of Ukraine, which has largely isolated Moscow on the international scene, saying it wants to stay neutral.
Away from that, Democratic Republic of Congo's Ministry of Education, in collaboration with UNESCO, issued a report on Wednesday emphasizing the need to continue the reform of free basic education in the country for maximum student enrollment. Let's take a look. The report showed that massive numbers of students have completed elementary school in the Democratic Republic of Congo compared to previous years. The elementary school completion rate has increased from 32% in 2000 to 71% in 2020. The report has further recommended an education budget increase, further training of teachers, more resource allocations, and an elaborate vision plan for the ministry. There are still 3.5 million children between the ages of 6 and 11 who are not enrolled in school in DRC, and 73% of them leave elementary school without having acquired the necessary basic skills in French and mathematics. The report also highlighted strategies that involve parents in school management have proven effective in optimizing teaching conditions. Let's take a quick break. We will be right back. Welcome back. You're still watching TV Africa News, the right to know. In our business news today, 3 years ago, amid a blaze of optimism, African leaders officially launched a new continent-wide free trade area after 17 years of haggling. But as the leader traveled to Addis Ababa for the annual African Union Summit this weekend, transforming the blockbuster pact into reality remains a tough task.
The African Continental Free Trade Agreement, billed as the biggest free trade accord in the world in terms of population, gathers 54 out of 55 African countries, with Eritrea the only holdout. 2 days of talks under the theme Acceleration of AfCFTA Implementation will open on Saturday. The African Continental Free Trade Agreement is trying to boost intra-African trade by 60% by 2034 by eliminating almost all tariffs, creating an economic bloc of 1.3 billion people with combined gross domestic products of $3.4 trillion US. African countries currently trade only about 15% of their goods and services with each other, compared to more than 64% with European countries. If fully implemented, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement would lift 50% Africans out of extreme poverty.
In our health news today, Ivory Coast will reopen its land borders on Wednesday night, closed since March 2020 at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. The government spokesman announced on Wednesday after the Council of Ministers. Côte d'Ivoire had closed its land, sea and air borders on 22nd March 2020 when the whole world was barricaded against the pandemic. While the sea and air borders reopened after a few months, the land borders remained closed. Côte d'Ivoire borders Liberia, Guinea, Mali, Burkina Faso and Ghana. Millions of people from these countries living on Ivorian soil had to take back roads to their home countries. Côte d'Ivoire had been relatively spared by the COVID-19 pandemic with about 800 deaths according to official figures. Last month, the National Security Council, chaired by Head of State Alassane Ouattara, welcomed the excellent results recorded in the fight against COVID-19 since 2020 and announced the gradual lifting of the measures provided for under the state of health emergency. And finally, with our sports news today, Duncan Chikankane Mobiru drives the Ford Proto but says he's not shaken by the existence of a more superior Ford version on the local rally scene. Ahumza with more.
Chikankane in the Ford Fiesta Proto was neck and neck with Yasin Nasser in a Ford Fiesta Rally 5 during this month's opening round of the National Rally Championship. They exchanged the stage wins throughout. It is Yasin Nasser, however, that would claim the victory, with Mobiru dropping to third position after mechanical mishap. Nasser's car is the latest version of the Ford Fiesta Rally 5 in Africa and the faster car, while Mobiru drives a Ford Fiesta NRC, the prototype built by Nexans Motorsports in Latvia. Despite the differences, Mobiru acknowledges Yasin will likely hold a big advantage once he fully adapts to his car. Mobiru, the 2021 National Rally Champion, says he'll go all out for this year's title.
That was the news. Thank you for always keeping it TV Africa.